Welcome to Transform and Transformational, a Teach Beyond podcast. I'm Kian.
And I'm Heather. We're here to explore what it means to be transformed in our own lives and how that overflows to living lives of transformational impact in our communities.
This week is our Work and Calling series, which is when we get a chance to talk with someone at Teach Beyond about their own story and the work they're a part of.
I'm excited to hear from Wangūi Maina today. Wangūi was born in the UK, but spent most of her formative years in Kenya. At age 18, she moved back to the UK, joined the Army for 7 years, and during that time earned her Bachelor's of Science degree in Environmental Health.
In addition to Kenya and the UK, Wangūi has lived in Senegal and has traveled over 25 countries.
More recently, Wangūi earned her postgraduate certificate in geography to enter the field of education.
Let's go over to that conversation now.
Welcome to the podcast, Wangūi.
Thank you, Heather and Kian. I'm really excited. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today.
Absolutely. We are so excited for this conversation and excited to just hear your story and hear about what God is doing in your life. As we get started, it'd be great for us to figure out exactly where you are. And the best way to do that, I think, is what is something unique when you look out your window that you see from where you're sitting that you get to see every day?
Well, that's a really good question because when I look out of my window in the morning or throughout the day, actually, I get to see the amazing rolling valleys. Literally, there are valleys of the region that I live in. It's a tea growing area, and right in the horizon is the Aberdare Ranges. And so we don't live very far from the forest and have a privilege of being able to sometimes just go for nature walks into the forest. And it's just a really outstanding place of natural beauty, but also just to be surrounded by green all the time. It's really nice.
That sounds amazing. Could you, for those of us who might not know those regions you mentioned, can you zoom out a little bit more and where are those regions found in the world?
Yes. Okay. So yes, this is the Mount Kenya region in a place called Nyeri, in what will be called like the central region in Kenya.
That's great. And how long have you been living there?
Close to a year and a half.
That sounds like an absolutely beautiful place to live.
Yes, it is. And I don't get used to it. I'm just like, oh, it's
Yeah.
just so beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe as we're beginning, you can also fill us in on what is your role right now? What does that look like on a typical day?
Okay, so I kind of hold I would call it a triple hat role because I'm currently doing, country director for the Open Schools here in Kenya. Open Schools Worldwide works with out of school children, what we'll call at risk children who are out of school, but also marginalized children. So they might be going to school, but also maybe the kind of education, the quality of education that they're getting might not be that great. So we part of the Open Schools program can work as an intervention program to help improve their literacy and numeracy levels. Under Teach Beyond, but I'm seconded. I actually came to Kenya seconded to another ministry called Kusoma 2, which is Kiswahili for read period or read only. And so with Kusoma 2, I'm the project lead and administrator. And then my third hat is homeschooling mom to 4 children or 4
Wow.
growing teenagers, 15-year-old, 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and 10-year-old. So
Wow.
my typical day is in between lessons is doing lots of coordination in terms of the projects that we are running here in Kenya with the open schools, doing all of Kusoma 2's administration, logistics, because like, for example, this Saturday, we are going up a 10.5 hour drive up north to the extreme north of Kenya. And so obviously part of the admin role is organizing all the logistics, liaising with
Right.
partners, and we'll be going. And I also run training for the open schools programs. So yeah, and then plus coordinating volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
liaising with partners. So it's a mixed bag of many things in between,
Yes.
as I said, teaching my children.
Yes. And anytime there's administrative work, you end up doing a little bit of everything to have different details sorted out. So that's great.
You sound incredibly busy. You are doing a lot of different things kind of all over the place. How did you get here? How did you get to doing what you're doing? And what did you learn and find out about the areas you're serving that made you want to go there and serve there?
Yeah, great question, Kian. Oh my gosh, that question takes would have to take me back to when I was a teenager. Just to give a very short brief. I gave my life to Christ. I grew up Catholic and gave my life to Christ when I was 12 years old. As a result of American missionaries, there were actually young people who came and did a play at my primary school, and afterwards they gave the call, for anyone who would like to give their lives to Christ. So I gave my life to Christ when I was 12 years old. But when I was 16 or 17, um, I had just a very strange instinct that I wanted to kind of work with young people in the African continent. And at the time, because even when I would share it with people, they would laugh at me. I used to say, when I'm older, I'm going to go to Chad, the country of Chad, and I'll have a beat up old Land Rover with some kind of with like a rucksack. So, but I didn't know anyone from Chad. It was just felt like it was one of those things that had just been put. But I was really excited about that when I was a young person. So kind of fast forward, and it was during my teacher training year that I began to kind of have that. The Lord began to just impress on me my heart. I wanted to serve in the mission field. So I kind of that's where I would say didn't start, but it's been kind of a process.
Yeah. What helped you to realize that missions and that original calling that you had sensed from the Lord way back as a teenager and your studies and education that were much later in your educational career actually went together? What helped you to see that connection between missions and education?
I think because again, goes back to when this was kind of part of my testimony when I was in the military, when I was serving the British Army. I joined the military when I was 18, and I was so on fire for the Lord. And I remember that I was based in a place called Aldershot, and I had kind of family that was living in London, and there was a church there that used to run a youth group. They had a youth ministry, but for some reason, the youth leader decided to was moving. So I approached the pastor and I said, "Could I just help with the youth?" Because at the time, I just also come from Kenya, where there was a really vibrant youth ministry. So I just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to kind of serve in this ministry.
Yeah.
So every time, no matter where I was based in the military, I would always travel back on a Friday to run this youth,
Hmm.
the youth to lead the youth at church, and I did that consistently for about 5 or 6 years. But then I found that I loved working with young people. I just, even though wherever I was based in the military, the Lord will also make sure I wouldn't have duties on the weekend, so I could travel back and work with these young people.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
fast forward when I moved to Kenya in 2016, when my marriage broke down, and I had heard of Kusoma too, which we'll come to it in a minute. That was working with young people with literacy issues. So it was kind of during this place where I began to kind of have a sense of calling that I enjoy working with young people, and maybe teaching is a really good route in which to be able to minister to them and also
Hmm.
meet their educational needs. So I don't know. That's how it grew,
Yeah.
but it started from way back because of the service that I was doing with young people at church.
Wangui, as you were considering serving in missions and thinking through what that would take from you, did you have any big barriers you had to overcome as you kind of thought through what that might of how that might impact your life?
Yes, the very first one is when I felt the Lord kind of calling me into missions when I was during my teacher training year.
Mhm.
As I shared earlier, unfortunately, my marriage broke down in 2016. So I remember thinking, I have never heard of a single parent mission. Actually, that was like the biggest barrier. I was like, I've never heard of a single parent who's a missionary. And so I didn't think there was anyone who looked like me. And I like to give this testimony because I did this Google search, and it was a hard. Can you imagine having a hard search on Google trying to find out if trying to find a story, and you can't, and you find, you have to really dig. That was my testimony. This was like 2017, 2018 there. And I only came across three stories of three other single moms, but that was the game changer for me. And there's another backstory to that, of what the Lord did just from those three testimonies. I ended up meeting one of the of those people who I came across on the internet, and and
Wow.
and then out of, because she ran a ministry called Single Parent Missions. So she ran a conference in the UK. She said she was going to come to the UK, and I said, wherever you go, I will be there. And I go, and then I meet this other missionary, a mom who was a widow, who was serving at this school that I had been looking at. So I knew it was not a mistake. But it's so interesting how God, literally how God works, and how He puts people, and even a Google search.
That's amazing. I love how, yeah, God can put people in your life who can share their stories and encourage you and
Yeah.
to talk about how God's been there for them. What about other things? Is you talking to your family about you going overseas as missionaries? Were they supportive, encouraging? Is that something they were used to, or was that something kind of out of the blue that shocked them?
Yeah. I think I'm really grateful for my family, for my mom and dad, and my two sisters. They are extremely supportive. I think when I joined the military, I didn't. No one in our family had been in the military, so the fact that at the time when I was, I think, 18, when I shared that, oh, I'd like to join the army, they were supporting, were very, very supportive, 100%. So I think that sense of, Wangui is
Yeah.
kind of adventurous, her telling us, she's wants to go into missions. Yeah, that's kind of part of who she is, and we'll support it. I've had lots of encouragement, only encouragement from my family. They've been so amazing. But also, just answering the question about barriers, Kian, apart from obviously trying to figure out what a single parent looks like on the mission field, obviously a big one also is the finances, because obviously you're trying to figure out, what's going to happen with the children, what's happening with everything. So yeah, those I would say are the two biggest, what the biggest kind of barriers and challenges that I was facing when I had that initial call.
So sometimes these barriers can feel insurmountable, but here you are. So, what kind of was the next step? What helped you to feel like you could say yes?
So I was looking at different opportunities online. And that's when I came across a school in Senegal. And that's when I felt that the Lord was opening that door for me and my family. March 2020 happens. And for me, this was the first time I literally felt the Lord say, forget all the things that you're trying to figure this out. You're trying to just trust me and go. That will remember being so, so clear. And so I decided to just be obedient and just do exactly that. And it's another, I have so many testimonies, but it was just how the Lord made that happen in literally 6 months was only God. And so literally the end of 2020, right in the middle of a second lockdown, my children and I were moving to Senegal to step into missions, to an unknown everything. But there was a very clear sense of calling then.
It's amazing to see how God has worked even through that really challenging season. So, Ongoy, you were serving in a school setting prior to hearing about Teach Beyond specifically, but now let's hear a little bit more about what first led you to consider a role with Teach Beyond. How did you get connected with open schools worldwide? Fill us in on that.
When my family and I moved to the school in Senegal, it was really, I'd like to say, it was a game changer for me and my family. We absolutely loved being at this school. I loved teaching there. My children loved the school. However, unfortunately, after being there for 3 months, we got the news that the school would be closing after 40 plus years of serving in the region. and that really
Wow.
broke our hearts because I was like, oh, this was
Yeah.
supposed to be, a long-term plan.
Oh
But
my goodness.
but
Wow.
yeah, but um the Lord had other plans. So when we had the news, obviously when I was praying about the next move, I was looking at different opportunities, and that's when I came across another school on the African continent that was closely connected to Teach Beyond.
So you heard about Teach Beyond through a school, and now you're working in a very different place in a nomadic community. Can you tell us about the nature of your work with Teach Beyond and open schools, and especially about the community where you serve?
When I joined Teach Beyond, I joined from the perspective of I had this project that I'd heard of, that was doing work with rural and nomadic communities in the north of Kenya. It's only when I joined Teach Beyond and started the work here in Kenya that Open Schools approached me and asked if I'd be interested in also heading the literacy projects that they have in Kenya. And I found that the two things I was doing was already so closely connected to literacy. It was an immediate merge. So it was something that I wholeheartedly took up because Open Schools does literacy and numeracy, and Kusoma too also raises is advocates for literacy and numeracy opportunities for rural and nomadic communities in the north of Kenya.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what that community looks like? What that like your city or your town looks like that you're serving in with open schools?
Yeah. So just to give a bit of context, Northern Kenya in 2024 still has the highest illiteracy rates in the whole of East Africa, of the East African region. So you have a Northern Kenya is quite a huge area. And the communities that are found in Northern Kenya are mostly nomadic communities. So, of course, they are rural, they're isolated, but they're nomadic communities who move around with their livestock. So so what then happens is there are very few schools in these regions, and so children have very little access to quality education. So it's in this context and it's with these particular communities that I'm working with the Open Schools project.
How many kids are in the open schools program in like a season or in a school year?
Well, it all depends. So, I will speak specifically about Chesitet, where we've been. We have about 40 to 50 students who attend the Open Schools program as an after school program. So, most of these children go to school in the morning, and then they come and join the Open Schools program in the afternoon. So we'll say about 40 to 50 students. And then we also do maybe another 15 and who do not go to school at all, who have either been married off when they're quite young, and so that they they technically are not allowed to go to school by their families, or they are herding livestock, for example.
What does their life look like? What does being a part of the open schools program mean to them?
Yeah, so we I would say we have kind of two categories of learners, and those are the student learners that we target. So we have this school going children. So this particular region, as a community, uh, they they still practice a lot of traditional practices, which is not bad in itself. It's just it depends on whether it's detrimental to the children. So, for example, in this particular community, in this particular context, girls at age 10 are circumcised, so they go through FGM, and then at age 12 they're married off. So they're still children. But if she's 12 years old and she's married, as a fourth wife, for example, in this particular community, this is what they do. Even though FGM is illegal in the country, and even if, um, according to the human rights, children must attend school, with this particular community, they still practice these traditions. So so what we try to do is, for example, in the morning we target these girls who've And because at age 10 they begin to groom them to get married, so they might not be going to school because they're being groomed. Another thing also for the girls, I'll speak for both girls and for the girls, and then I'll come to the boys. The girls, at from literally from age 4 5, they are groomed to be mothers. So you'll find a 4 5 6 year old girl carrying their 1 year old sibling for miles, walking with the child, looking after the child like a mother. And then, as I said, by age 10, they go through FGM. At age 12, they get married off. The boys, on the other hand, at age 5, they are considered men. So they are not allowed to sleep in the homestead, so they sleep outside, outdoors. And this particular region has quite a harsh environment. It's very hot. The terrain is very rocky, so literally kids just sleep on the ground. It's like we live in two different planets, not even worlds. You cannot believe in 2024. It's just so shockingly different that sometimes you completely can't get your head round. But that's the context. And so, like, when before we started the open schools program, Kenya has the two national languages are Kiswahili and English. And even the school going children could not speak a word of Kiswahili. When I did the baseline test for the school going children, there was the most of the children could not tell the difference between letter A, B, K, D, and the numbers. I think we only had two students who at least knew the alphabet. And these are the ones going to school. Quality of education and the access to resources is non existent. Most of those children had never seen a picture book in their lives. These are the school going children. Most of those children had never even seen a tarmac road until the open schools program started. And so it's just, yeah, we tell the stories, but it's really, yeah, it's really shocking, really, when you see it firsthand.
When you talk about the girls who are married, is them being educated, going to school, is that something that's welcome and accepted by the community, or is that kind of forbidden? How is the open schools program looked at by the community? Are they excited for you to be there? Is education valuable to them, or how do they view the program?
Yeah, so it's a mixed bag in the sense that you have families who, if you give the child the opportunity to go to school, they will willingly say yes. What we've also begun to find that is also, if you say to maybe the parent, because the thing is, the children are seen as commodities, literally. The girls to be sold off to bring cattle, to bring livestock, sorry, and the boys to look after the livestock. So, if you're able to convince the parent that there will be a value at the end for this child, they usually are willing to let the child go to school. But you need to be able to talk to them and convince them that is the right thing to do. But also the children themselves, and this is the testimony that we have. For example, one of the we had a young man who used to he was a boy of maybe 10, 11. He looks after the livestock, so when we run the open schools program, he would pass by with his camels and goats, and he would come and stop and look and peek and look at what we are doing. But usually we would unfortunately chase him away because he always walked around with lots of weapons. He had knives and bows and arrows. So we said, but he seemed interested. So we said to him, if you want to join the program, you need to go to school. And shockingly, one day he actually removed all his weaponry, told his dad he wants to go to school, and started going to school. And he's been to school, he's continued to go to school, joined the open schools program, and not stopped since. And now he's just joined boarding school and he's really excited. So to me, again, when you talk about transformation, it's those individuals who you're like, wow, for him even to see the value of this, and this is something that he wants to do rather than just look after livestock, is a big win, really.
That's amazing. We can see the impact that literacy would have. Can you tell us any stories about how you've seen education and literacy have an impact and make a difference there in your community?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the greatest impact that I have seen is literally seeing children who were not interested in school because of the cultural practices that prevail in these communities, take up an interest in going to school and staying in school. So I would say that's been one of the greatest impacts that I've observed. My greatest vision is to see them come to know the Lord Jesus and serve and give their
Mm,
lives to Christ, because
mm,
it's only through that real transformation can happen.
mhm,
It's been very interesting to be to kind of work in a community where there's a lot of spiritual darkness, and because there is no church in this particular community, there's a pull towards darkness, so, and that tends to be kind of elevated. But what we've seen is where Christ is preached fearlessly, transformation happens. So I'll just give an example. So one of the things that we were trying to do was to teach the little children to memorize scripture uh, in their language, and to memorize and to speak it out loudly. So, for example, Psalm 27, they will speak it out loudly, and because of being able to speak it out loudly, the parents will be hearing it, and they'll be
mhm,
hearing the word of God. So,
mhm.
being able to see the children wholeheartedly memorize scripture and being able to speak it out loudly, we know that whatever negativity or whatever darkness, it can't come against the light. And the children, it's been so just transformative to be able to see them just do that and boldly do it, and the community have begun to say these children have changed. We can see change, we can see impact. Yeah.
And that's so incredible that you're able to bring these educational programs and school and education to these kids along with the gospel message. It's just so exciting to hear. As you're experiencing all these different things and teaching these kids and seeing these transformations happen, what's something you wish you could go back and tell your past self? Tell yourself 10 years ago, 15 years ago about where you're at right now. Is there any words you'd want to share?
I think when God puts something on your heart, some I always like to tell people think that God's calling is some big voice up in the air, or or you'll hear some booming, but it's those impressions that the Lord puts in our hearts that sometimes are really those are the promptings, actually, those promptings that when we are obedient, if we step out in faith, he is faithful and just to fulfill what he has called us to do. So yeah, I guess I'll just tell my past self to just trust the Lord, no matter what challenges come your way. The Lord is faithful. Just stay consistent and stay consistent. Eventually it will come to pass.
And what would you say, Wangoi, are some ways that you've seen God transforming you through your time with Teach Beyond?
The greatest thing that I'm learning, even through all this, is something that we've started to pick up. I've picked up, me and my family, very recently. Towards the end of last year, somebody kind of gave it an acronym: consistent Bible reading, CBR. Yeah, consistent Bible reading. And so basically what that looks like for me and my family has been just waking up at a particular time, and the first thing we do is have a Bible study. And I am finding that that's really beginning to impact just how my day is informed, how I'm being able to just process, to just to go through life. When we take the time at the start of the day to just give our time spend in his word and with the Lord, um it doesn't he gives us the grace and the strength to be able to 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 face whatever it is that we're going to face, whether it's in the classroom, because even in the classroom setting, different challenges will come. But I feel like when you fill yourself with the Lord, with His Word in the morning at the start of your day, you begin to have those little nuggets, whether it's being able to teach you in a biblical worldview, or whether it's just being able to have those moments when I can just give it to the Lord. So yeah, I would say that I would encourage just the way you do it with every believer, but even with a teacher, that start your day with the Lord. It really makes a difference, and I'm beginning to see, yeah, that yeah, it's when you're consistent with it.
That's such a good reminder. Thank you so much for sharing about what you're doing. It is so encouraging to hear how God is using you, and God is using you in the area you're at, just with those around you who you've been called to serve. Before we let you go, there's one last question we like to ask all of our guests, and that's what's one thing that's changing your life right now, and that can be something big or small. And you can take whichever way you want to go. So I'll go first, and then Heather, so you have a little bit of time to think about it. But what's changing my life right now is in where I'm living. It's the beginning of the warm season, so we're able to start gardening. So we're outside planting new plants and planting some food that'll hopefully we'll be able to eat in a few months from now. So
Nice.
it's been really fun.
That's so exciting. I feel like the garden always makes an appearance in our What's Changing Your Life in this podcast because we enjoy doing that. Totally different. Something that's been changing my life lately is I had the opportunity to go back and talk with students at my alma mater where I went to university, but not just in like a recruiting sense, which is often what takes me back there, but to be actually able to teach a few classes here and there this past month, to be able to talk with students about different topics that relate to my work with Teach Beyond, but aren't just recruiting. So it's been a fun challenge to speak to some university students. What about you, Wangui? What has been changing your life lately?
Oh, mine's just very simple. I love, love,
Great.
love, love. I've been discovering new routes in the forest with the kids. And it's so the other day
Ooh.
we discovered this waterfall, and it was like, I can't believe
Oh,
this has been here all this time, and it's not that
Wow.
far.
Yes.
So yeah, so I get really excited.
That's great. It sounds like you really are not getting used to the view and the beautiful scenery and all of that. Yeah, that brings us all the way back to the beginning. So that's a great place to end.
thank you so much for talking with us.
For our weekly spotlight today, we're highlighting positions and creative access locations. It was so great to hear Wangoi's story, but we realized there are also a lot of amazing things that God is doing that we're not able to share as specifically and openly because they're happening in sensitive locations.
To learn more about creative access opportunities, visit teachbeyond.org/go or click on the link in the show notes.
Kian Wangoi and I serve with an organization called Teach Beyond. As you have heard, education plays a big role in missions, and Teach Beyond is a part of that.
As followers of Jesus, Teach Beyond is a global community providing transformational education services as part of God's ongoing mission to transform individuals and communities into all He intends.
Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org or follow us on social media.
To help more people find the podcast and hear about Teach Beyond, we'd love it if you would leave a rating or review and share the show with a friend. Be sure you're subscribed or following the show on the platform where you listen so you never miss an episode.
And as always, you can reach us at podcast@teachbeyond.org. We'll see you next week.
The mystery word for this week is and.